It is very hard for archaeologists to explain how that was done using purely leverage and mechanical advantage. You can say, oh, perhaps they built a ramp and hauled the stones up the ramp.
Across the world, there are ancient places that quietly hold pieces of human history. Some of them look simple at first, like rock and dust shaped by time. But when you stand close, you notice details that make you wonder. Cuts in stone, lines that meet so well. Work that seems slow, patient and carefully executed. These sites do not speak, but they leave enough behind for us to wonder how much people knew long ago. Tools change, knowledge grows, but the marks in the stones stay. They remind us that skill and effort came long before modern technology. But what if those ancient marks weren't just signs of skill, but proof of a forgotten technology lost to time? The claim from Graham Hancock. Graham Hancock is a writer and researcher who studies ancient sites and old technologies. He has published books and given talks that many people follow. Hancock now says he has found physical traces that point to a specific method the ancient Egyptians used to cut hard stones. He names quarry areas near Aswan, including the unfinished obelisk site, and points to carved blocks at Karnak and statue fragments from Luxor and the Giza Plateau. He calls these places key evidence and wants them tested. He notices marks on some granite surfaces that look regular in depth and spacing. He highlights straight grooves that run for long stretches. He also points to smooth, polished faces on broken pieces. He believes some circular holes and sockets match the work of tubular tools. Hancock argues these patterns do not fit a simple account of pounding with hammerstones, followed by abrasive sawing. He says copper tools alone seem unlikely to do the fine work on dense granite without another supporting method. Hancock brings small fragments and photographed surfaces forward as what he calls proof. He describes parallel striations on chips, long shallow grooves, and round sockets that he reads as records of a guided cutting system. He suggests the marks record a repeatable mechanical action rather than a random impact. He says the grooves and sockets show consistent geometry that points to tool control. He asks for a close study of grain-level damage inside the grooves to separate abrasion from impact. He requests specific tests. He asks for a microscopy of the grooves to show how grains of quartz were removed. He proposes thin section analysis to read fracture paths inside chips. He requests accurate measurements of groove width and depth to compare with experimental tools. He calls for replication trials where teams try to reproduce the same marks using known ancient methods and possible alternative methods. He wants laboratories to carry out those trials and publish the raw data. He stresses the unfinished obelisk at Aswan as a key place to examine. The obelisk lies in the old quarry with visible work lines. Hancock argues that some of the tool marks there deserve new measurement with modern instruments. He names the obelisk base at Karnak and a set of statue fragments in the Egyptian Museum as further items that can be tested. He invites museum curators and field archaeologists to open access so samples can be studied keenly. He accepts that copper and sand abrasion is the common explanation for how the Egyptians worked hard stone. He does not deny that pounding with dolerite and abrasive sawing can make many observed features. His main point is that specific, regular marks on some pieces ask for additional study. That study would either confirm current methods or show a method not yet accounted for in standard texts. Hancock frames his case as a call for transparent science. He says open data and shared methods will resolve questions faster. He asks for published micrographs, measurement tables, and replication reports so other teams can test the same samples. He stresses that measured facts, not opinion, should decide whether a new method is needed. He offers access to the fragments and to the pictures he has taken so that researchers can begin investigating as soon as possible. He also notes that granite and diorite are very hard stones compared with limestone, and that small differences in grain structure matter when tools remove material. He asks for three-dimensional scans and high-resolution images to be published so other researchers can compare features without moving fragile objects. But if the tools and techniques we think the Egyptians used can't explain every mark, what else might they have known? Could an older, lost method have shaped these stones with the precision we still can't match today? Where the stones came from and how they were worked. The raw stone for many famous Egyptian monuments came from quarries near Aswan on the Nile. Workers dug out granite at places such as Shalal, Elephantine, and the unfinished obelisk site. The unfinished obelisk still lies in the quarry where craftsmen began to shape it and then stopped. That block shows clear-cut lines, drill pits, and work steps. It gives direct evidence of how quarrying began and how a large block could be prepared where it lay. Quarry workers first scored the rock to mark the block outline. They used hard pounding stones to chip away at the surface and to start a groove. Workers then undercut beneath the block to free it from the bedrock. Craftsmen used wedges and levers to pry the block apart along controlled fractures. Dolerite hammerstones, which are tougher than granite, appear at quarry sites. Those hammerstones left rounded impact pits and fracture patterns that archaeologists have recorded. The pattern of impact pits and fractures shows where workers aimed their blows and how they guided breaks to avoid unwanted cracks. Controlled fracturing allowed a block to be freed in a planned shape rather than by accident. After a block was detached, shaping came next. For softer stone-like limestone, copper chisels and stone tools cut more quickly. For granite, the work changed. Granite is dense and contains hard mineral grains. Skilled workers used a two-step approach for fine shaping. They guided a softer metal tool or wooden template while pressing hard sand against the stone. The sand contains quartz grains that are harder than the granite. When the sand is forced and rubbed under a guide, the grains act like many tiny cutters. This process removes material slowly and produces straight grooves or flat faces when the guide moves across the surface in repeated passes. Archaeological workshops and quarry dumps preserve the tools of the trade. Broken dolerite hammers lie with chips of granite. Copper tools appear in contexts where softer stone was shaped. Remains of wooden sledges, ropes, and tilt levers have been found near quarry sites and at building areas. Workers used wooden frames and guide bars to keep lines straight during cutting. Evidence of wedges and channel slots shows how they undercut and split blocks. Where researchers worked, layers of waste and small chips built up, and documenting the order of steps from rough removal to fine finishing. Water and wooden wedges helped split stone in some operations. Workers drove dry wooden wedges into cut slots and then soaked them so the wood swelled and opened fractures. This trick lets crews split stone along desired lines without heavy metal tools. Moving blocks down the Nile required planning and many hands. Sledges carried blocks to barges. Men placed wooden rollers under sledges or wet the sand in front of the sledge to reduce friction and make hauling easier. Reliefs and tomb paintings show them hauling statues and obelisks, but the material evidence of ropes and sledges confirms how the work took place. Polishing was the final stage. Craftsmen used successively finer abrasives to remove scratches and to bring a shine. They tested the surface with flat tools and adjusted passes until the face met the desired finish. A highly polished obelisk or statue required time and many workers. That effort explains why granite often appears only in important objects, such as royal statues, sarcophagi, and monumental columns. Field studies and replication tests support this overall picture. Archaeologists find dolerite hammers at quarries and see matching fracture patterns. Experimental researchers have used copper guides and sand to reproduce grooves and polished faces. The presence of matching waste flakes, tool marks, and moving equipment across quarry sites forms a consistent story. At the same time, regional and chronological differences exist. Different crews in different periods adjusted techniques and tools. Those variations account for small differences in marks and finish seen from one site to another. Archaeologists also find simple measuring tools and mason marks that show planning. Small marks and grooves help to line faces during cutting. Nearby workshops held bowls of sand, ropes, and wooden frames used as guides. Animal bones and charcoal in workplace layers give clues about the crews who worked there. The combination of tools, marks, and waste gives a clear step-by-step picture of how stone was taken from the quarry to finished form. But what if all this conventional evidence only scratches the surface, and a deeper, hidden technique defies everything we know? The proof Hancock offers. Examined Graham Hancock presents a set of stones, fragments, and surface photos that he says show a specific way ancient Egyptians cut hard granite. He points to long, straight grooves on some blocks, to smooth patches on broken pieces, to round sockets that look drilled, and to tiny flakes with parallel striations. He reads these features as repeatable patterns. He argues that repeatable patterns suggest a guided tool or a controlled process rather than random blows. The grooves attract attention because their width and depth stay steady along long stretches. A steady groove can come from guiding a tool or a template during cutting. Hancock says that some grooves keep the same profile over meters, and that regularity does not fit a pure pounding model. He also highlights round sockets of different sizes. He proposes that a hollow tube used with abrasive material could bore such sockets slowly by rotation or by pressing and moving. He shows small chips with linear marks and reads those marks as the trace of repeated abrasion rather than a single break. Hancock names objects and sites for study. He mentions the unfinished obelisk at Aswan, obelisk bases at the Temple of Karnak, statue fragments from Luxor, and worked blocks at the Giza Plateau. He asks that museum objects in the Egyptian Museum in Cairo and the Grand Egyptian Museum at Giza be recorded with high-resolution scans. He calls for named pieces to be measured so that others can test the same samples. He requests careful tests. He asks for stereo microscopes to record the direction of tiny cuts. He wants scanning electron microscope images to show how individual mineral grains were removed. He asks for thin section slices so specialists can follow fracture lines inside flakes. He requests three-dimensional surface scans to compare groove shape with specific tool edges. He asks that replication trials include full notes on the tools, the abrasive grain sizes, the number of passes, and the person-hours used to make similar marks. Experts offer rival readings for the same marks. Guided sawing with a straight bar and quartz sand can make long, even grooves when the guide is steady and the abrasive is present. Tube drilling with a hollow pipe filled with sand can bore slowly and leave circular holes. Pounding with dolerite hammerstones can create chips that later show striated faces after a grinding pass. Modern cleaning and past repairs sometimes add marks that look older. Weather and salt crystallization can blur or change small scratches. These alternative possibilities make careful recording and lab work essential. Because marks can be ambiguous, replication is central. Researchers reproduce cutting steps using dolerite hammers, copper guides with quartz sand, and hollow tubes with abrasive mixes. Those trials measure how many passes are needed to reach a groove of a given depth, and how the groove profile changes with pressure and guide material. Trials also record the time needed for polishing to produce smooth faces. Results show that abrasion with sand and a guide can produce many observed profiles, but some specific features require close matching of grain size, pressure, and guide shape to appear. Hancock stresses non-destructive methods first. He asks for surface scans, careful photography, and microscopic photos before any sample removal. He understands why curators limit sampling. He suggests that where sampling is necessary, it should follow strict chains of custody and conservation rules. He names the Ministry of Tourism and Antiquities of Egypt, university laboratories, and museum conservation departments as institutions that should collaborate. He also asks for public reports that include raw photos and measurement tables so independent scholars can compare results. Small differences in grain size, pressure, and tool angle change surface marks. The process of open testing can show which steps make which marks. Independent teams with geologists, stone conservators, and experienced masons can repeat trials and compare notes. That joint work will clarify whether the marks come from known techniques or from something that needs a new explanation or methods. But before any chisel or drill can explain these mysterious marks, one question remains: what if we've missed something entirely? Tests, experiments, and open questions. Researchers test ideas by repeating actions under controlled conditions. For stoneworking, experiments focus on 3 basic motions that include striking, grinding, and drilling. Researchers use hard hammerstones to strike granite and to break away large pieces. They also use softer metal guides with abrasive sand to grind straight grooves and flat faces. Hollow tubes filled with sand or grit can slowly pierce holes when pressed and turned. Each method leaves a different pattern on the stone surface. Tests measure those patterns and compare them to the marks left on ancient blocks. Pounding trials use dolerite or similar hard stones to hit granite. They record the size and shape of impact pits and the way the rock fractures. Those trials show how repeated blows create deep scars, and how workers could control breaks by aiming blows along a planned line. Pounding produces rough surfaces and irregular chips. It does not make a fine, flat face on its own, but it prepares blocks for later grinding and polishing. Grinding trials use metal bars or wooden guides, while workers press quartz sand into the cut. The sand grains do the cutting. Trials vary in grain size, pressure, and the motion used. Researchers count the number of passes needed to reach a depth and measure the groove shape after each pass. Results show that a steady guide plus coarse, then fine sand can make a straight groove with an accurate profile over long distances. Grinding is slow. Skilled workers must make many passes to remove a small amount of material. Drilling trials use hollow tubes, solid rods, or tubular cores. A hollow tube can be used with sand and a rotating or up and down motion. Trials test different tube diameters, abrasive mixes, and motion types. Results reveal how circular sockets form, how fast they advance, and how much wear a tube suffers. Drilling is slow and often produces a tight circle of wear at the tool edge. Modern replication has reproduced holes that look similar to some ancient sockets when the right mix of sand size and pressure is used. Polishing tests follow grinding and use successively finer abrasives. They measure the passes and tools used to remove grooves left by earlier steps. Tests show that long, steady rubbing with fine sand, water, and flat tools produces a high shine over time. Polishing requires patience and a steady hand. Trials show how a surface moves from rough to smooth in measurable stages. Labor and logistics tests study how many people and what simple machines are needed. Researchers test sledges, wooden rollers, and wet sand to move heavy blocks. Those trials measure friction and the number of men required to haul large segments. Practical trials also record how seasonal river conditions affect hauling and installation plans. Recording and measurement matter. Non-destructive scanning tools allow researchers to keep the object intact. 3-dimensional surface scanning and photogrammetry record every ridge and groove. High-resolution stereo microscopes take pictures of tiny scratches. Scanning electron microscopes reveal how individual mineral grains broke away. Portable instruments, such as portable X-ray fluorescence, record composition without sampling. Thin sections taken from loose flakes or fragments let petrographers read internal fracture paths and grain relations. Conservation rules limit sampling of museum objects. Curators at the Egyptian Museum in Cairo and at the Grand Egyptian Museum at Giza require permissions. Where sampling is allowed, scientists follow strict chains of custody and conservation standards. Many researchers therefore favor non-invasive scans first and only remove a tiny fragment if prior tests justify it. Open questions guide future work. One asks which combination of grain size, pressure, and guide shape makes the regular grooves that some observers highlight. Another asks whether some round sockets can only be made by hollow tubes, or whether guided grinding can mimic them. A third asks how repairs, cleaning, and centuries of weather may have altered marks, and whether those secondary effects can be separated from original patterns. Regional differences also matter. Different quarries and workshops may have used slight variations in tools and sequence that change the marks left on stone. Replication work must be transparent. Teams should publish raw three-dimensional scans, microscopic photos, and full experimental logs. Open data will allow private groups to repeat trials and to compare results. Collaboration among geologists, stone conservators, experienced stonemasons, and archaeologists helps match laboratory results to field evidence. When tests report person hours, grain sizes, tool shapes, and motion types, other researchers can follow the same steps and confirm or challenge findings. Careful recording, wide replication, and open sharing of data will help match tools and methods to the marks on ancient stone. Clear methods and shared results offer the best way to decide which techniques made the grooves and holes that are under debate. The stones have spoken for millennia, but are we truly hearing what they're saying? As tests continue and debates unfold, one mystery endures. Did ancient Egypt's builders wield forgotten tools or simply unmatched skill? What secrets still lie hidden in the granite beneath the sands? And when the final proof emerges, will history rewrite itself?